Now, I think we've got to realise that what we are already seeing is a world war, World War III. It's not a war in Ukraine over there, a war with Israel over here, and then, China's threatened war against Taiwan over there, all separate. And that's another reason why Israel's war with Iran is so dangerous. As I've said for a couple of years, there is a new alliance of tyrannies. Russia, China, Iran and North Korea all working together, helping each other out with their wars, sending weapons, diplomatic cover, and with their planned wars too. Iran, for instance, supplies Russia with kamikaze drones for its war in Ukraine. And China and Russia are backing Iran diplomatically. Last week voted against that International Atomic Energy Agency resolution condemning Iran's nuclear weapons program. And right now we are seeing how a war in the Middle East can help China. America has been forced to move the aircraft carrier Nimitz and its supporting warships from the Pacific, where they're patrolling near China. It now seems on its way to the Middle East to support Israel, which would leave China, of course, freer to attack Taiwan. I'm not tipping that yet. It's far too early, I think, for China to do that. But this is how this alliance can work, always stretching the West, which is already desperately undergunned. Its weapon stocks are very low after supplying Ukraine for 3 years. And all those Australian ministers saying, we just need to negotiate. They don't realise our enemies operate under different moral rules. Honestly. I mean, like I said, some actually believe that until, the lost Mahdi returns, Islam will not be reformed, and that can't happen until Israel is destroyed. And they chant war cries in Parliament like this. And I just got to clear up one thing in my argument with Steve Conroy, who said Trump's response, just negotiate, is exactly like Penny Wong's. I want to read that tweet I referred to now that I have it, or a Truth Social post, where Trump said there's already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter with the next already planned attacks on Iranian means being even more brutal come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it is too late. Can you tell me where Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese, Richard Marles issued any threat like that? Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of the Australian newspaper. Greg, great to see you. Where is this conflict going?
Well, great to be with you, Andrew. So I must say I absolutely endorse your proposition that the conflicts in Ukraine, Taiwan and Iran are all related and in a sense part of the same conflict. Israel still has at least some days and perhaps more than that to go in trying to destroy key Iranian nuclear, military and now economic targets. The $64 million question is whether Israel can hit the nuclear facility in Fordo without American help. The bunker buster bomb can only be carried by an American aircraft. And, Trump is better than Biden. Biden wouldn't have allowed Israel to do this. But the Israelis very much wanted the Americans to help them because they have so much more powerful an air force. And Trump is now facing a little bit of a rebellion in the lunatic MAGA ranks. That idiot Tucker Carlson has turned against Israel and thinks Trump has betrayed America by supporting Israel. Yeah, that kind of gang, they're as bad as the far left. They're just as deranged. And I think it emanates from the same kind of self-hatred of our civilization that you find on the far left. But Trump, to his credit, is not preventing Israel from doing anything. I think his talk, it's easy to get a deal between Israel and Iran. I think that's silly talk from Trump. But on the other hand, he says sometimes you've got to fight it out. Who knows what he means, really. But I think the Israelis will keep going for as long as they think they can make more damage on the Iranian nuclear program. They're only going to do this once, probably, unless they have to do it again. But it's probably once in 20 years or maybe once only ever in history, hopefully. So they're going to do it as thoroughly as possible. And I think they're also probably degrading Iran's capacity to keep hitting them. So I would expect it to go for some days yet. And political pressure will mount on Israel. You know, I mean, our government's contribution is sort of pathetic and banal and meaningless. But nonetheless, I'm sure the Israelis are determined. And Trump has got their back in the most essential way. So Trump deserves credit for that.
I showed at the top of the show, Greg, how close Iran is getting to 9 nuclear bombs. Now, for Israel, of course, that could mean the total destruction of the world's only Jewish state. It just would, you know, like I said, a third of the size of Tasmania. How many bombs would that take? But what would it mean for the rest of the world, Iran having nuclear weapons?
Well, Andrew, I explore this in a column tomorrow. What we are seeing is two terrible trends in the contemporary world. I mean, we're seeing 1,000 terrible trends, but we're seeing nuclear weapons roar back into the centre of all strategic calculations, and we're seeing the breakdown of American extended nuclear deterrence. All American allies except Israel and Britain and France don't have nuclear weapons of their own, which means we all shelter under extended American nuclear deterrence. That means if a nuclear weapon state struck us with a nuclear weapon, America would strike them with a nuclear weapon. But if more semi-rogue states like North Korea and Iran get nuclear weapons, not only are they then impossible to deter within their own region, because if you're taking serious military action against them, they'll threaten nuclear weapons against you. But the development of missile technology means that North Korea and Iran will soon be able to hit the United States itself with missiles. That means if North Korea is having a confrontation with South Korea and America intervenes, North Korea can threaten Los Angeles and San Francisco with nuclear annihilation. And if Iran gets the nuclear bomb, it will also be able to do that. And we know that China proliferated nuclear technology to Pakistan and to Iran precisely to hurt India and to hurt America. All this proliferation ultimately comes from China and some of it from North Korea, you know, from China through North Korea. And it would be a diabolical strategic development for the world if Iran gets nuclear weapons. And if it does, then quite sensibly, probably Saudi Arabia and other nations in the Middle East would also want nuclear weapons to provide for their own security. And a world in which we go from sort of 7 or 8 nuclear weapon states to maybe 10 or 12 or 15 is 1,000 times more dangerous.
Particularly when one of those countries is led by what we would consider irrational leadership with religious motivations, end of the world type of motivations that are, you know, different moral paradigm completely that we cannot talk them out of. Just quickly, Greg, and this is a, you know, one of the things that's driving China is this belief that the West is in collapse, that America is in collapse. Not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong. That is actually a firm belief. The dictator of China mentions it often. There is indeed almost a civil war right now in America. I exaggerate a bit, but crikey from the pictures. And it's whipped along by reckless Democrat politicians. These rioters in Los Angeles waving Mexican flags, attacking federal agents trying to deport illegal immigrants. The Democrat assemblywoman who posted a picture of Donald Trump being beheaded. A Democrat deputy mayor urging protesters to fight. Here he is.
Leave our people alone because we will fight and we defend them.
And then, Greg, there's the appalling Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who ran for vice president last year, telling Democrats to actually get meaner.
Because I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator? It's because he is. It's because he is. The governor's being mean, and the governor's speaking out on that. Well, maybe it's time for us to be a little meaner. Maybe it's time for us to be a little more fierce. Because we have to ferociously push back on this.
And look at this U-turn from this hypocrite. 2 weeks ago he said that. Then a nutter, wearing a rubber mask, pretending to be a policeman, assassinated 2 Democrat politicians in Walz's own state, shot another, and now Walz is preaching love instead. Here he is.
Now's the time for us to recommit to the core values of this country. And each and every one of us can do it. Talk to a neighbor rather than arguing. Debate an issue. Shake hands. Find common ground.
Frankly, Greg, the man's a scumbag, but what is happening to America?
Well, Andrew, I agree with you absolutely. But at the risk of sounding like a pathetic, simpering globalist centrist, I'd say both sides of American politics are, I would say both sides of American politics are pretty much equally guilty at this. Trump himself, I mean, Trump has a lot of pluses and a lot of minuses, but Trump himself speaks of his domestic opponents in the most often vile and disgusting terms, and refers to people routinely as rapists and murderers and criminals and crooked and all the rest of it. And I think, in a sense, this terrible conflagration in Los Angeles has suited both Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom perfectly well, because in America you win by exciting your base, and Trump and Newsom both got to excite their base by demonising each other. So I think there is a terrible breakdown of basic civility in America. I urge people to watch that wonderful movie Reagan. Not only is it a different time in America, but Reagan is just a different leader, you know. He'd just laugh at you if you insulted him. He'd smile. And I think both sides of American politics, driven partly by social media, are really very dangerously demonising each other, when the worst of them generally are that they're idiots. They're not really murderers and, wannabe dictators and scumbags and all the rest of it.
If you thought you're getting an argument from me, you're wrong. I agree with you completely. I would also add George W. Bush, Bush Jr., to that list of people that believe in civility even to their worst enemies. Thank you so much indeed for your time.